Hey, Richard Myers here, coming to you following a nice vacation. It's good to be back, and I wanted to do a short video. Behind me, you see a cozy quilt. I want to just move to the side here. This quilt was made especially for me by my sister-in-law, Margie, and I appreciate it so much. I wanted to thank her in this public way. I know that many of you listening are family members, and of course know Margie and her talents and skills as a craft person, and it's a beautiful, a beautiful uh, treasure that I'll treasure, and I wanted to thank Margie for that. And then I want to give a brief, just a spiritual devotion to encourage you in a way that will give you an example of how you can read a scripture, study a scripture, analyze it, and then come up with a kind of a one sentence summation of it. And then that one sentence summation hangs in your brain along with the scriptures, and it transforms your life. And so it's in Romans chapter 12 that I want to address briefly. Romans chapter 12 is kind of the therefore. Paul has presented a lot of theology, a lot of truth, and then he says, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, I want you to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. And he follows then, for through the grace given to me, I say to every man among you not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment, as God has allotted to each a measure of faith. And so in this verse, right away I noticed it said to think. First of all, it says transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then he says to think, to think, to think, to think, to think, to think. And so he wants us to think, analyze, process. And so the lesson here is, and I've often repeated to some people's chagrin, we ought to be better than we think we are. And so you can just analyze that statement. It has a full body of possible meaning to you and to everyone. But if you just, this is what I mean by you're reading a scripture and then you develop a one sentence, and then that sentence kind of hangs in your mind. And as you go through life, it comes to mind. You always want to be better than you think you are. And so again, just a brief devotional, and give you something to chew on, a little meditation. And of course, I wanted to thank Margie for her very kindness. I'm going to, in another video, point out that sin is always destabilizing. But I would say, in contrast, love and acts of love and expressions of love is always stabilizing. And so thank you, Margie, for a very stabilizing expression of love. May God richly bless each of you.